This is episode number 174 of the Guns Magazine podcast. Hi there, and welcome to the Guns Magazine podcast, one of the shooting world's biggest gun talk programs. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent T. Thanks for joining us as we talk to the interesting folks who make up the world of shooting, hunting, law enforcement, and the firearms industry. Before we get started, let's hear a quick word from our sponsor, 4 Patriots. Let's face it, if you don't have electricity, you're living in the Stone Age. But with the Patriot Power Sidekick from 4 Patriots, you get a solar generator that doesn't need installation. It's quick, easy, and portable, on the go, or even inside. The Patriot Power Sidekick is small, about the size of a lunchbox, but it's powerful. Powerful enough for your phones, medical devices, or even a mini fridge. The setup comes with a free solar panel, free shipping, a 365-day satisfaction guarantee, and best of all, you get 10% off your first purchase by typing in the code GUNMAG at checkout. That's 4patriots.com. Use the code GUNMAG. I'd also like to mention our supporting sponsor, iPal. Here's a simple product for all iron sight shooters. Simply attach the static cleaning iPal peep sight to your prescription or safety eyewear on your dominant eye, and you get a focus sight picture. Plain and simple, this aperture resolves difficult vision issues. Go to iPal USA to get your kit today. In this episode, I go on a rant about shotguns and why they aren't so important in the grand scheme of things anymore. I know the hunters, trap, and skeet shooters out there are screaming right now, but honestly, if you read the popular gun press, shotguns are pretty much non-existent, and that's a crying shame. Now, I'm joined by Roy Huntington as we both go on a tirade about why not a shotgun. Good afternoon, Roy.
Afternoon, sir.
I appreciate you joining me for, this is kind of a personal thing. It's kind of a rant on my behalf, I guess, and we're going to talk about shotguns. I just had an experience today that I was at my old police department, and we were doing a tour with some folks, and they opened the armory, and there were all the shotguns lined up, just waiting to be fondled and caressed and used for their intended purpose, and they're sitting there in a rack waiting to be sold off or something. And you know, I've said this all along, and it just really inspired me to today's topic that what is wrong with a shotgun? Why won't people talk about shotguns? I mean, they're like everything else. They are at the peak of their technological advancement, especially with ammunition nowadays. Roy, tell me, why won't people talk about shotguns anymore?
Boy, you're preaching to the choir here. You started to say something before we started, and I'm not going to steal your thunder, but I think it is partly fashionable now.
Yeah,
that policemen have rifles. It's like, you know, when Glocks were introduced and they were trading Glocks for Smith & Wesson automatics for free, and then suddenly Glock took over the police market. I think people always thought, well, they did that because it was a much better gun. But actually, I think it was because it was fashionable, and
Absolutely.
it was the best deal anybody could get at the time. And then after that, you know, you keep doing something long enough, and then everyone believes that there must be a good reason for it. And so I remember this transition to rifles. As a matter of fact, I was guilty of helping to initiate it on the police department in San Diego. I recommended it first when the Marlin Camp carbines, remember they had them at 9 and 45. I brought one in, and I, you know, let people shoot it, let the range staff shoot it. And they said, wow, this is really cool. And I said, yeah, well, then how come we don't have one in every police car? You know, and they said, well, that's stupid, and, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I could never get them to understand that it was just a more accurate way to deliver your handgun ammunition. It wasn't really a rifle. Well, later on, they adopted the Ruger PC-9 carbine. You know,
really?
That. Yeah. But then, of course, then the rifle guys said, well, then if we're going to do this, let's get AR-15s. And then pretty soon, the shotguns went from the front rack that you and I grew up with to the trunk, and then pretty much eventually gone, except for some less lethal stuff.
Well, you know, I would say something that probably a lot of folks don't realize. I think the public thinks that when a police department chooses a particular weapon system, there's a long testing process and research and a committee. And that is true. And especially maybe on a agency the size of yours, San Diego, but on most police departments, even some pretty good sized ones, who makes that decision? Generally the lead firearms instructor. And where does he get his information? The gun store and the gun press.
It's true.
It's absolutely true.
Yeah. Unless he just is told by the chief, hey, we have this much money.
And that happens too. And where's the chief get his information? The gun store and the gun press.
Yeah. Very anecdotal. I know when I used to attend the IACP, the International, what is it? Chiefs of Police Convention, whatever it's called. And I was working for Bianchi at the time. I was always appalled at the limited amount of real world knowledge there were from, agencies.
Yeah.
And that's when I did my research, and I found out that 80% of the agencies in the country are less than 20 officers, and 80% of those are less than 12 officers.
Yeah,
and it gets worse than that even. And I used to see it all the time, because there would be a police chief and a captain and a lieutenant. Right? They would walk up to the table, and I would say, "Well, Chief, what kind of holsters you guys carry?" And then he would look at the lieutenant and say, "Lieutenant, what kind of holsters we carry?" And then he would, the captain, the captain would look at the lieutenant and say what kind of holsters he would carry. And then he would answer. And what I would find out is that it's a 3-man police department, and they have a chief, a captain, and a lieutenant.
Yep.
But you're right. Those guys are just like, I like Smith & Wesson, so that's what we'll get.
Yeah. Yep. And, our agency has done that with handguns. We've been through quite a few of them. And again, there's reasons they switch, but a lot of it is affected by, talk on the street, as you said, anecdotal information. And I hate to say this, the gun press, you and we're partly guilty for this.
I think, though, I'll speak for you because I've read you for 20 years, and I know what I've written is we have always tried to keep it objective and sane.
Yeah.
We've never said, oh, this is the only gun you should have on your police department.
The ultimate man stopper.
Yeah. But I think all of that is fashion changes. And I think that shotguns are a tragic victim of this. I'm going to say this, like almost uneducated decision-making sometimes. And I don't mean that, and I don't mean to disparage the current crop of trainers, but by the time I retired, we had several generations of police officers who had never actually made a misdemeanor arrest and put somebody in handcuffs and took them to jail for it, because they transitioned to misdemeanor citations for the overwhelming majority of these things. And so we had multiple generations of policemen who had never taken one into custody for a misdemeanor and put them in jail. And so they just didn't know any better. Right. And so as these guys started saying, you're all going to die unless you have an AR-15 in your police car, well, then it just like this feeding frenzy went in that direction.
Well, and then, moving beyond the cop realm, I know that's what we know and we talk about, but I think in the non-law enforcement world, that's where the gun mags are probably even worse about influencing people. That, we've all put black rifles on the cover, and we've all talked about all the cool guy stuff that you can buy for the guns. And we've collectively, and I'm speaking of the firearms industry, the firearms journalist industry, we've thrown shotguns on the trash heap of history, even though, as I said in the very opening, shotguns are at the peak of their technological advancement at this point. Shotguns are a great, viable weapon system, whether you're talking hunting, you're talking self-defense, home defense, varmint control, XYZ. You come up with a need that you can solve with a firearm. A shotgun works great for that, but the fact we're not even talking about it at all in any of these forms, law enforcement, non-law enforcement, it amazes me.
And maybe we should refocus the interest, because like you say, you need buckshot, there's buckshot. You need a slug, oh, there's a slug. You need less lethal, oh, there's less lethal. I'm sorry, but there's no AR-15 in the world can do all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
With that, you either have a rifle or a bat, but a shotgun gives you so many options. Well, an interesting thing about how popular shotguns are and how much people are still interested in them is the fact that I did is a bird shot adequate for, for defense video.
Yeah.
Oh, it's probably 8 or 10 years ago now. I noticed the other day it's got like 1.7 million views. Yeah, million with an M. And there's still people still are posting questions or comments, which I still answer. But people are really interested in it. But even then I noticed that there's a lot of myth and mystery and magic, and you rack an 870 and then everybody runs, or number 8 shot, will give you a rat hole wound, or if you use less than double-aught buckshot, you're going to die, and it's just, and you're right. I think we may have perpetrated some of those myths.
Yeah. And it's probably getting worse because now we have a generation that, especially on the self-defense side, if they don't hunt, they've not had any contact with a shotgun. They've not seen it in the gun press. So what I predict will happen is one of these days, when everybody gets tired of black rifles and all that stuff, somebody at one of the gun magazines or websites is going to go, we've discovered the new ultimate man stopper. It's a shotgun. And then that whole, exactly. And they'll make it sound like it's something new. And unfortunately, especially in today's society, newer is better. And if it's some kind of, thing that the guys down at the club haven't discussed, and you can walk in there with your 870, and they're, wow, I've heard of those, but oh no, this is the ultimate man stopper. It says so right there on Guns and BS Monthly. And you'll see this whole thing recycle again,
The cycle occurs again.
Yep.
Well, you're so right about technology being, it's the epitome of technology for shotguns. I remember the old beat to death 5-shot Remington 870s used to bounce around our police cars, with the bead front sight.
Yeah.
And, they would just, knock your teeth out when you shot them, with buckshot or slugs. And it scared a lot of people away, I think. I mean, I know for a fact that a lot of the, especially women, they just were terrified of shotgun qualification.
Sure.
They would always come away with bruises on their cheek and, bruised shoulders. My wife, Susie, was that way. She's a slender gal, and she's game, but man, it wasn't fun.
Yeah.
But I had Mossberg sent me a gun just the other day. I just got it. And it's a modern 20 gauge pump gun. Kind of it's like a crossover tactical / sporting, to where you could kind of use it for either one. But good Lord, it's affordable. It's wonderfully made. It's manipulates easily. It doesn't kick very much. It's in 20 gauge. And like you say, ammunition technology is such that you literally can tailor the shotgun load for exactly the job you need to do, and I mean, even some of these smoothbore shotguns now, they'll shoot 4 or 5 inches at 100 yards with slugs.
Well, I was just sitting here thinking the last fad that I can think of involving shotguns was all my buddies that bought 20 gauge deer slug guns, some of them bolt action, some of them, whatever. Sure. But that was the big thing. Everybody was moving away from the 12 gauge because the 12 gauge is a handful to shoot. Whereas the 20 gauge was always kind of thrown off to the side because, well, it's just a 20 gauge. You're still, I don't remember off the top of my head what a 20 gauge slug weighs, but it's the size of the end of your little finger, and it's moving at a good clip. It's still a pretty substantial round. And guys were discovering that they're pretty accurate, especially in today's guns, and they didn't kick as much. And what a great deer gun in states that didn't allow rifle hunting. So now a lot of states are going to rifle hunting, so the shotguns are kind of getting put away. But that was a huge thing. All my buddies, all of them were, talking about their latest, greatest 20 gauge deer gun and how it was going to, put them in the record books. So I think that was the last real fad that I remember involving shotguns.
The slug technology is amazing today. And
absolutely.
You can still get rifled shotgun barrels. And I remember, guys, probably 30 or 35 years ago, somebody made a bolt action. It was like a precision rifle, only it was a shotgun.
Yeah.
And they had them in 12 and 20 gauge, and they were rifled barrels, and you could scope them. and they would shoot an inch and a half at 100 yards.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going to the SWAT team and I showed them one. And I said, you know what? You talk about a breaching tool. I said, you need to shoot through somebody's front door or something. Here you go. And of course, they didn't really think that was a good idea. And they all wanted to Barrett 50,
right?
Which in an urban environment, really, is that a good idea? One time I shot it was a solid copper Sabo 20 gauge.
Right.
And we were shooting at a car. And so we were shooting, this is testing, ammunition stuff. And so it was an old, like a 60s car, had steel bumpers and steel rims and everything. And so we were shooting it with lead slugs, and the lead slugs were almost always bouncing off the heavy steel bumper. Well, I shot with one of these copper slugs, and it cut a quarter size hole right out of that, bumper. And we all just like looked at each other for a minute. And so somebody shot a steel rim of the car, and it just right through it, like used a hole punch, And so we were all like rethinking everything, because in those days we didn't have rifles.
Yeah.
So,
And, I'm sitting here thinking as you're talking about when I look at the guys that I really look up to, especially in the training community, the tactical type community, two things that really surprise folks if you tell them. And I think sometimes they almost disbelieve you when you say this, but I would be interested to hear what you say, Roy. A lot of these guys that we know, they carry a revolver at least as a backup, usually a J-frame, one of those things, but some of them are carrying revolvers as their primary guns. And many, or not all of them, have a shotgun by their bed. So two outdated technologies, yet the guys that are the real deal guys, not us, the real deal guys, that's what they do.
One of the most popular classes that I've seen, and I'll be honest with you, I don't even know how popular they are anymore, but in the older days, early days of Thunder Ranch, gun sight and whatnot, were shotgun classes, combat shotgun classes.
Exactly.
And, when companies like Scattergun Technology came out, I think that was one of the first ones who really raised the bar on that. They would put aperture sights and ramp front sights and tune the actions. And, these were really beautifully made shotguns that were made specifically for defense. And gosh, it just took off like wildfire. And, some of these shotgun classes, I don't know if you've ever actually been to like a dedicated 2 or 3 day shotgun class. I
certainly have.
It is really confidence inspiring.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
It's like, man, if you've got this pump gun or whatever you're shooting, it doesn't matter what is. I can't think of any problems you're not going to, be able to take care of, especially in an urban environment.
Well, exactly. And, if you look at a shotgun versus a rifle, there's only one thing the shotgun cannot do that a rifle can, and that's hit 300, 400, 500 yards. But my caveat is, unless you're a police sniper, how are you going to justify shooting somebody at 300, 400, 500 yards in a normal situation? I mean, you can always dream up some scenario, but as a normal, earth human, as we say, especially a non-law enforcement person, if you smoke check somebody out at 400, how are you going to explain that? How are they endangering you unless they were perhaps a sniper? But in the run-of-the-mill world, do you really need that kind of capability? So, if you're talking, I've got to be able to hit somebody on the mountainside over there. Yeah, a rifle's the only realistic thing, but everything else from contact distance out to 100, maybe even 125, 150, the shotgun will do virtually as well. Don't you agree?
I would agree. I think there are people, dedicated rifle shooters, and I can't really argue with them that yes, they would be more precise probably, or, maybe hit more reliably. But of course, when things get within 20 yards or so and are starting to move fast, a good person with a shotgun is probably going to be extremely effective. Plus, and everyone forgets this sometimes, is that, there's an old adage about there's a lawyer's name inscribed on every bullet, that you fire. And so, if you're in a defensive shooting, especially in an urban environment, and you've just let go with a 308 or a 223, and it blasts its way out of your house, well, now that's going to go 6 blocks and, kill some little old lady who's hanging her laundry out. And you're probably not going to have that same issue with a shotgun. But, the other thing is that you can see $150 pump shotguns now. They're made in the Philippines or made in Turkey or something like that. I saw some the other day at Brandon's gun show, and it was, I picked them up and I looked at it and I said, there's just nothing wrong with this.
Right.
I mean, am I going to go shoot 5,000 rounds through it? Probably not. But, for $150 and a couple boxes of different kinds of shotgun shells, there you go.
Yep.
I mean, you're good to go.
Well, and I've got two thoughts. I want to get back to first this whole idea of Tom McHale. I love this concept. He says shooters are binary. Something's either the best or the worst. And we're sitting here pumping up shotguns. And as we were just talking about, especially defensive scenarios, the shotgun's not the answer either. It's an answer. And the whole point of this broadcast is we're just saying don't automatically poo-poo the shotgun in favor of a rifle. But I would be the first to agree with you, Roy, that the shotgun is not the one answer to everything all the time. So we're agreeing with that. The other thing, going back to the money side of things, back as a young, broke police officer, I could afford an 870 Express. And that was the one, you remember, it was Parkerized and plain wood, which actually I felt was more useful to me. But that was my hunting gun and it was my home defense gun. So I'd take it out, go duck hunting, go rabbit, pheasant, quail, whatever. And then I'd come home and put the 18-inch barrel on it and stoke it with slugs, and it went beside the bed. So, it was a matter of I could afford one decent gun at that point, but I never felt like I was cutting corners on my home defense plan because I had a great gun, and yet I could still take it out and go hunting, and it never failed. I've still got it. It's still my favorite hunting gun. It's probably the one I've owned in my entire life that I can say I've hunted through every kind of weather, every kind of stuff, every kind of game, and it's been under or next to my bed many, many times, when you hear the bump in the night. So what kind of gun can you spend I think I spent under $300 at that point. And I think I even got the long and the short barrel or whatever. And, in terms of dollar per value or enjoyment or use, I don't own a gun that has given me as much as that one single pump shotgun.
That's a good advertisement. I think you're right, though, about a lot of shooters are just black or white.
Yeah.
And also it's like you're either for me or you're against me or something.
Yeah.
And you don't have to prove that your idea is the best idea if it works for you. And to me, guns are like a three-legged stool. You need a shotgun, you need a rifle, and you need a handgun.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're missing one of those, well, then your platform isn't as stable.
Right.
Behind me, I have a gun cabinet, and in that gun cabinet, these are guns I keep at hand, right? I live in the country, so you never know what's up. And I have an over/under 20 gauge shotgun, and I have a mini 14, and I have a 22 rifle, and then I have a semi-automatic 22 pistol. And it's depending on what's going on, is that you grab the appropriate gun,
right,
for the occasion. And if it's a coyote across the pasture, I'll grab the mini 14 maybe. But if it's something, crows are attacking the dog or something, I'll grab a shotgun. And I just think that's it. Having said that, though, the default is I have an old rusty 22 semi-auto. You've seen it. You've used it in my Easy Go, and slung in the front in a case is one of those $150 pump shotguns.
Yep.
Loaded with double-aught buckshot. And it's like, okay, if it comes to that, we have it.
Exactly. So I guess what we're saying here is, kind of going back to what I said a minute ago, the shotgun is not the answer. It's a answer. And don't automatically throw it aside. So it's
not a bad answer.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. If you're worried about being the cool kids, yes, it's a bad answer for that because they're just not cool. But if you're like me and you like to kind of be contrarian, try that. Start talking up the shotgun next time the guys are hanging out and talking about the latest black rifle they just built. Start talking about your shotgun. You will be the cutting edge at that point.
Somebody's probably going to go, "What's that?" I'll tell you what, though. And on the other side of the coin is that, lest we stay on the tactical, defensive shooting side of things, shotguns, as you started to say with your hunting guns, are also an awful lot of fun.
Yeah.
I've got a 410 side by side from CZ. I think they call it the Quail or something like that. And it's the most elegant, slender. I mean, the action's smaller than your wife's wrist. I mean, it's light, it's elegant, it's fun to shoot. Modern day 410 ammunition is very effective, and it's just plain fun. Yeah. Right. And so I don't know why people are ghosting them. Although I think that there are legions of people out there, mostly sports people, who still are excited about shotguns.
Oh, I agree. I agree.
Look at the offerings at the SHOT Show. It's hundreds of displays of sporting shotguns, but definitely the ones that are geared more toward home defense-y kind of stuff, their numbers have definitely fallen. Yeah.
Actually, they told us in meetings this year at SHOT Show, I think it was 2 different manufacturers said, well, yeah, we're seeing the hunting side of the shotgun world is moving forward, probably increasing. Not a huge amount, but after the great slowdown of 2022/23, they're seeing that hunting shotguns have not slowed as much as some of the other stuff. So that's kind of surprising that, the black rifles have cooled off faster than shotguns have.
That's interesting because I was in Brandon's gun store not too long ago, and I couldn't help but notice at his display rack, he's got half of it's full of bolt action hunting rifles. And the other half was all full of camouflage semi-automatic sporting shotguns.
Yeah.
And I said, Brandon, what are you doing with all these sport? He said, that's what sells.
Interesting. Maybe we're cutting edge here, Roy. Maybe we've just gotten out in front of it.
I like to tell people that I'm always 10 years ahead, but it doesn't always work that way.
Well, maybe we're 20 years behind, so that puts us 10 years ahead or something.
Yeah, it'll cycle through again, and then we can say, see? I told you.
But one last thing I was going to say that you brought up a second ago was my wife and I were driving around the other day. It was, it's winter here in the Midwest, and we had a nice day, and we went out and had a little outing and did some sightseeing and some hiking. And I drove by a sporting clays, and I said, I haven't done that in so long, and I love doing sporting clays. And it's just one of those things. It's not that I've quit doing it. It's just, other stuff gets in the way. And I said, I want to start doing that. And she goes, well, I'd come and do that with you. And I said, really? You'll come shoot with me and sporting? She goes, well, that sounds really fun. I'm like, cool.
I'll be darned.
So,
and it's an excuse to buy another shotgun.
It is. It is. So, to summarize things, as we've said a couple of times now, it's not the only answer, but nothing is. But just don't throw shotguns out. Don't throw the shotgun baby out with the bathwater, because they're still viable, whether you're talking self-defense, certainly for hunting. Shotguns are still a thing. And shame on the journalists among us that maybe we don't give it the due that it should.
I think I agree. I like what you're going to, you'll be doing here with the shotgun column in Guns Magazine. And, and hopefully I think we'll be able to refocus some of that.
Excellent. Well, Roy, thanks again for taking time. I always enjoy our chats, and it seems like the listeners do too. So we will certainly be chatting here in the near future. So thanks again.
You bet. It's always fun. I just feel like we're just sitting around talking about guns.
Like I pointed out talking to Roy Huntington, a shotgun's not the only answer, but it's a good one you should still be considering. If you like this episode, you might want to check out episode number 145 as Roy and I discuss your last rifle. In episode 158, I have a tongue-in-cheek monologue on how to become a gun plumber. And finally, Roy and I have a deep conversation in episode number 165 about going beyond shooting. If there's a topic you want to hear, somebody you want us to interview, or you want to share your thoughts, please drop me a line. That's editor@gunsmagazine.com. As always, you can subscribe to us on your favorite podcast directory, such as Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Audible, and several others. And you can always get the latest episode on YouTube and at gunsmagazine.com. At the same time, please subscribe to the Gun Cranks audio podcast on those same directories, or you can watch it at the Gun Cranks YouTube channel. I'd also ask you to visit our great sister publications, American Handgunner Magazine at AmericanHandgunner.com, AmericanCop.com, and take a look at our numerous special editions available for sale on our websites and at Amazon. And finally, I'd like to remind you to visit our sponsor, 4 Patriots. You can find out more about their food kits and other preparedness supplies at 4patriots.com. That's the number 4, the word Patriots, and .com. And please don't forget our supporting sponsor, iPal. Visit them at ipalusa.com. Well, that's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. For the entire staff at FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat. Now get out there and get shooting.